So we're going to move to talking now in a bit of specifics in terms of starting to begin our thinking in preparation for two specific opportunities that come up. As Claire and Pub have talked about, it's a very complex system. There's a whole regular system of reporting, and the upshot is that basically at any one time the government's reporting to somewhere, so there's something going on. So it's that very circular, regular process, and it can be difficult to know when the points of opportunity are where you can get in and have your say. But coming up next year, in 2017, there are two specific opportunities. One is the Committee on Racial Discrimination, which will be examining New Zealand in July, August, and the other is the Committee on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights, which will examine New Zealand later on in the year. So those are kind of foremost in our mind in this meeting, thinking about preparing for that. And we're thinking about preparing the Human Rights Commission's input to those committees. And we want to also to be, when we do that, to be informed by what you think are important. So that's one thing that we're hoping to get out of today, is to hear your thoughts on the issues that you're dealing with that will help inform our engagement with those bodies. The other key thing we're wanting is to help you to start thinking and preparing for those things. As Papa and others have said, it does take a lot of preparation. You've got to have your things prepared in advance. You need to think about things like getting there, getting your accreditation, your badges and things like that. So now is really the time to start thinking and planning towards that. So we're quite early in the process for those. So it's a good time to do that thinking. The government also is obviously part of that process and does their reports to those bodies. So we're very lucky to have Lauren and Teresa from the Ministry of Justice here today to talk a little bit about their process, and then we'll talk more a bit further about opportunities for the public and other bodies, NGOs, the Human Rights Commission, where we get involved. So I'll just hand over to the Ministry of Justice first of all.
Cool. Well, tēnā koutou katoa, ko Lauren McIntosh toku ingoa. He kaimahio ki te tahu o te ture. So my name's Lauren McIntosh. I work at the Ministry of Justice. I'm in the Civil Law and Human Rights team there. And one of the main focuses in our team is international reporting to the UN. So this was sort of discussed by Claire earlier. So these are the core international human rights treaties and the New Zealand ratification status of those treaties. So we've got the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, the International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights, Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination, and the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination against Women, Rights of Persons with Disabilities, Convention Against Torture and Other Cruel, Inhuman or Degrading Treatment or Punishment, and Convention on the Rights of the Child. So those are the ratified ones. These are sort of shared among government. So the Ministry of Justice is responsible for reporting against 4 of these main treaties. So ICCPR, ICSCA, CERD, and CAT. Sorry about all the acronyms. Can you all see this? Okay. I don't know if we can dim the lights, but and Ministry of Justice and MFAT also are responsible for reporting on the Universal Periodic Review, which Claire talked a little bit about before, and I'll go into further detail a bit later. It's not up there because it's not a treaty, but it does have its own unique process, which involves a review of the human rights record of each 193 UN member states. The Ministry of Social Development is responsible for the Convention on the Rights of the Child. The Office of Disability Issues, which is within MSD, is responsible for the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. And the Ministry for Women's Affairs is responsible for the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination against Women. So Justice has a fair few. So we're quite busy. So civil society organisations, and by that I mean NGOs, the public, can influence human rights reporting processes at several different stages and in different ways. The United Nations attaches great importance to cooperation with all non-governmental organisations and constantly encourages participation in all of its activities. Cool. Cool, so the first stage, the first point of the cycle where you can get involved is when a treaty body draws up a list of issues prior to reporting. I think you would have seen on the front table there's the list of issues for ICISCA and also for third. Yeah, Michael's holding them up. So most of the treaty bodies have adopted a simplified reporting process, which begins with the committee sending a list of issues to the state party before the state party writes its government report. So the list of issues is basically a list of questions, and the state report is the government's response to those questions. So those questions form the basis of the face-to-face examination later in the process. So the creation of the simplified process is important for civil society organisations because you can make submissions to the treaty bodies before they decide what questions to put in those list of issues. That means you can have a much greater influence over the questions that the treaty bodies ask the New Zealand government at a much earlier stage than before. And it's clear from looking at previous civil society submissions and the eventual questions from treaty bodies, the information from civil society has a really strong influence about what the treaty bodies ask state parties. For example, the shadow report submitted to the Committee for ICISCA covered the TPP, inequality, family violence, economic, cultural and social rights not being incorporated into the domestic human rights framework, and those are part of the list of issues. So you have a real power to influence those questions the government gets asked at that stage. It's difficult to predict when the different committees will release the list of issues, so it's important to keep an eye on the United Nations Office of the High Commissioner website. And I think, and I can give that to you, sorry I didn't put it on the slide, or the Human Rights Commission as well. We'll have that. So the second stage where you can influence the process is when the government's written the draft report which responds to that list of issues. The government releases draft reports for public consultation, and you can make a submission on that draft. You can find the draft reports on the websites of the relevant departments, so if it's the Ministry, ICISCA, for example, in CERD will be Ministry of Justice website. You can find the, or you can be asked to be added to the mailing list that we have, so we can email it out to you when it's publicly available. One important thing to remember about the simplified approach is that the government report is only responding to the questions that is asked in that list of issues, and we have to be really strict with that because we have a really tight word limit. The UN will only allow us to submit 21,200 words, and that's, I think there's about 25 questions, so it doesn't give us a lot of words to write. So this means that while you can raise any issues you like in your submission to our report, the things outside the list of issues are unlikely to make it into the actual report. We'll be consulting on the fourth periodic report for ICISCA early next year, so keep an eye out for that one. And normally public consultation lasts for about a month. So the final point where you can get involved is before and during the examination, which is normally in Geneva. So once the government submitted the state report, anyone can submit their own report, often referred to as a shadow report, which has been talked a little about. So this is your chance to raise anything you want to the committee to know, but once again, it'll be most effective if you focus on the list of issues because that's what they'll be asking the government about. Committees can go into a lot of detail in the examinations, so you might want to think about what kind of supplementary questions you want them to ask the government on the topics of the list of issues. So this is a photo of the last examination that we attended. So that's the Minister of Justice, Honourable Amy Adams, and some senior officials accompanying her. So each treaty, this has been touched a little on already, but each treaty has a committee that's responsible for monitoring its implementation by the state parties. So committee members are independent human rights experts, they don't represent states, and they're elected by state parties to the relevant treaty. So the treaty bodies have several functions, including receiving and examining reports from the state parties. The state's delegation, so for example this one, appears before the committee, usually in Geneva, to discuss the report, in a public process usually referred to as an examination. The delegation is made up of senior government officials and is normally led by, or usually led by, a minister. When the committee examines the report, it will also hear from civil society organisations. So in the past, this has been done face to face, so anyone who wanted to meet with the committee had to travel to Geneva, just at their own expense. But more recently, some committees have used teleconferencing so that more people can participate. This does mean that you have to be awake in the very small hours to talk about complicated human rights issues, but it does make it easier to get involved. Again, our impression as government representatives is that these civil society sessions taking place, because they take place right before the government is examined, can have a strong influence over the specific questions committee members ask the delegation. At the end of the session, in which several states are considered, so it won't just be New Zealand, the committee issues concluding observations or sort of recommendations for each state, using the report, the dialogue and any other relevant information submitted by the civil society. Cool. So the Universal Periodic Review process is slightly different. So before the report's even drafted, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade and the Ministry of Justice hold public consultation sessions or meetings to get an idea of the key human rights issues that should go into the report. So as some of you will know, the state report is a lot shorter for UPR, it's about 20 pages long. So it's quite a general overview of the human rights situation in New Zealand. And your input at this early stage will help decide what issues the government decides to raise in the report. Once the report's drafted, the government will release the draft in the same way as a treaty report. And MFAT and the Ministry of Justice will hold another round of public consultation, and you'll have a chance to comment on the draft text of the state report then. Yep.
I was just wondering, how do you find out about the public consultation?
So normally, I think a press release happens, yeah, and then it normally goes up on the website. Also, we try and engage with as many people as possible through, I think, Human Rights Commission have a stakeholder list, and with our list as well. Yeah, so. Yeah, so at that second round of public consultation on the report, you'll have a chance to comment on the draft text, and you should try and focus on the specific issues in the report and what changes you'd like to see in there. Just like the treaty reporting process, the working group of the Human Rights Council also receives submission directly from civil society, but the process is slightly different around that. One important difference is that the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights produced an official summary of civil society's submissions. And that's important because it means the UPR is based on 3 key documents. So the state report, the report of the National Human Rights Institution, so in our case the Human Rights Commission, and civil society submissions. This gives the issues raised by civil society a much higher profile in the review by the United Nations principal human rights body. So other UN member states will use the information in those reports to inform their questions to the New Zealand government, comments and recommendations during our review. Cool. So this is sort of a rough timetable of when things are due. So we have in May 2017 we have the 4th periodic report due to the UN, which is why we'll be consulting early next year on that report. In August 2017 we've got the 3rd examination, and CDOR examination is in February 2018, that's Women's Affairs, run that one. ISESCA, it says June 2018, but that might have actually been brought forward. We're sort of working through that at the moment on the exact date for that examination. But the report's definitely due in May.
Is that accessible?
Yeah, I think we don't have it on our website or anything like that because it's quite a rough, it's not formal. Yeah, it's not official. It doesn't, the dates sort of our best guess, because quite often committees change dates and things like that, so we don't have it anywhere. But I think that OHCHR, the Office of the High Commissioner website, has timetables of when things are happening, and the Human Rights Commission will be able to provide updates as well through their newsletters around when things are coming up. Yeah, is there any questions? Or I hope that was helpful. We really do value the information that civil society give on our reports, and the UN does as well, so keep them coming.
Thank you very much.